Mike is the one that I feel is like very, very nervous.
Yeah.
I know because we went to Caltech for research to learn about like robotics and stuff like that. Um, and I remember like the guy was showing us like this legs that were just like very slow,
Oh,
like light years away from uprising.
yeah.
Like it took it like he could the robot legs couldn't stand up.
Yeah.
So I'm like, oh, okay, cool. They need to rise up first before they can rise up. So and then Mike and then Mike, the guy's like, hey, so yeah, so this is the robots, and then there's a little machine over here. It's like a little like car, and then it's like a yeah, it's really simple stuff, but we're working on it. Well, so any questions? And Mike raises his hands and goes, I have one question. What's your end game?
Hey guys, it's your host Julian. This week I sit down with Guillermo Martinez, head of story for the Oscar-nominated animated feature The Mitchells vs. the Machines, the movie that should have won the Oscar last year. We chat about the team's first trip to the Oscars, what gave the Mitchells so much heart, the world that was created and brought to life, and of course the time Mike Rianda, the creator of The Mitchells vs. the Machines, was invited to Caltech to talk AI and ask them what their endgame was, and the hilarious story about hiring a private investigator named The Wolf. I hope you enjoy the show, and I hope you're digging the new format. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to What's in My Head podcast. I'm your host, Julian, and today I'm joined by a part of the team that should have won the Oscar. I told you that's how we're going to start. They should have won the Oscars for The Mitchells vs. the Machines, Mr. Guillermo Martinez. Sir, how are you?
Good. Thank you so much, man. Thank you for having me in this amazing podcast, and then thank you for saying Guillermo right.
No problem, and thank you for Randy for putting this name and floating the name out there, man. Randy Myers, go ahead and check out his episodes because they are a blast. So we buried the lead a little bit there, man. You were the head of story for The Mitchells vs. the Machines. Like I told you earlier, this is my favorite movie of last year. It should have won the Oscars. Nothing wrong with Encanto. Encanto is great, but The Mitchells vs. the Machines was amazing and spectacular. With the exception of going into what happened on Oscar night, the infamous slap heard around the world. What was it like for you being there with the movie that you guys worked on being up for an Academy Award? What was that feeling like to you?
Well, it was, people always say like, oh, it's a surreal experience, but there is no better way to describe it because it was very surreal. Because especially something like Mitchell's where like there's a very like maximalist or very intense energy with that film that it almost screams like, yeah, we don't care about awards. Like we just want to have fun and we just want to make something that's like intense and cool. And so, but then, and we wanted to make something that like was that really resonated with families and people that, that people could just have fun with. And then, but then to start hearing people really like people saying like, oh, I cried for 4 hours after watching the movie, or I called my parent after watching the movie. I was like, oh, wow, this is like really deep. This is happening. And then eventually the critics were like saying like, yep, you guys are one of the best films. And then I was like, whoa, wait, no, it's not gonna happen. The Oscars are not gonna happen. And then that day we got the nomination. It was like really wild. I was like, this is bonkers. It was like they invited like a punk band into like a very like classy, like restaurant, and we're like, what are we doing here? Which felt that same way when we went to the Oscars, because like like we all got like me, Lindsay Olivares, who's the production designer, character designer, and Greg Levitan, who's the head editor. We were all in a car and we went to the Oscars, and it was just so bizarre because like 7 blocks from away from like it was all happening in Hollywood, around Hollywood or downtown Hollywood, I think. Yeah, and 7 blocks were blocked off, and it felt like we were going into Guantanamo Bay. It was really weird. It was like there were like blockades and like and it was insane, and we're like, whoa, this is happening. And when we got there was this big feeling of like, when you look at the Oscars, you're like, wow, that field looks big, and then you see it in the reality, you're like, oh, it was cool. No, that thing was huge, to the point that I think all of us were like, what are we doing here? We feel so out of place here. But it was an amazing experience, and we just try to live it. And there was a moment where we're like, you know what, let's just have fun, drink as much as possible, find little gift bags and just enjoy the night as much as possible, because whatever happens, it's been great. We never expected this, and to be at that moment, it was just wild. And also like, when Encanto won, after it we started going like, you know what, let's just go to the bar and like just and talk, because like sometimes it's really weird like to just be sitting there and just like watching a show. And you know, it was our first Oscar, but we were like, yeah, let's just chat. And so we went to the bar, and in the bar is when we find out about the slap. And I'm like, wait a second, the most historic thing to ever happen in the Oscars happened while, because I needed to drink, I needed to talk. I couldn't do that after. But yeah, no, like the energy was really, like, we were all so excited. We were like, yeah, we won. You know, we felt like we won just for this whole experience.
Man, that's awesome. One of my favorite things that came after the Oscars was seeing Mike post all of the photos of his mom. Like his mom just kicked her shoes off essentially and was like, I'm just going to power this person. Oh shit, I see this person going and getting pictures. It was such a, how do I put it? It was a beautiful, like, even though you guys didn't win, right? You guys went in there, and then all of the photos, and that's something that will stand the test of time. Just seeing, because you see so many people, and I've heard so many stories about people that didn't win an Oscar or didn't win an Emmy.
Yeah.
You know, they get upset, they walk out, you see the pictures of them very, very angry. But you guys went in there, and then even though you didn't win, it looked like you guys still had a blast because you guys were at the show. You know, most of the time it's Disney Pixar is getting top bill, and Disney Pixar are the ones that anybody ever talks about, right? So for you guys to go in there and then, like I said, seeing all the pictures of you guys having fun, you guys looked like a family, man. It was really cool for us fans to see it from our perspective.
Oh yeah, no, and it felt that way. And you know, it's we so I think someone told me, I was like, you guys were like basically the Bad News Bears of animation, you know, like you lost what you start celebrating, and it's like, why are they celebrating? Like it was like that energy, and especially when I, like, you know, it was like, you know, oh shucks. But then when we saw Debbie Rianda and her husband, and like Mike's dad and parents were like, oh, the night is going to be fantastic, because those two are just so energetic and they're so positive. And she was hugging me, and she's like, I'm gonna meet this celebrity, and I'm gonna meet this celebrity. And I'm like, well, I'm gonna support you. You'll do your thing. And then she's just meeting all, like, she met Anthony Hopkins. And I have videos of Mike breakdancing in the governor's ball.
Nice.
Like he will look at it and be like, that's not breakdancing, that is shaking in the ground. But I'm like, I saw breakdancing there. So, you know, and what it was so funny. Okay, Mike is gonna be like, "Don't say this. It's so embarrassing," but I don't care. He was like, "You know what? I got some fake, I got some fake Oscar trophies that he made just to us be like, yeah, you know what, you guys deserve to win." And so he was gonna give us all the fake Oscars, but they broke. Some of them broke. But we tried to use some of the awards to be like, hey, let's see where we can get in with this stuff. And we got into some places, but not every place. But yeah, it was fun. It was fun. Like, it was like, we didn't take it too seriously, and I think that's the magic of this, to be able to enjoy it. You don't also have to like be like, if you didn't win, it's like you don't have to be so sad. It's like, no, this whole thing is a party. There's literally a bar in every floor of the Kodak Theater. You know, so it was great.
That's amazing. Thank you for sharing that. Like I said, I really wish you guys, I'm pretty sure you guys do, I wish you guys would have won. But we won in a sense that us fans got to see this beautiful movie. Like I said, I buried the lead, and going back and we'll kind of jump a little bit here and there and all over the place. Fans know how the thing, there's really no structure to this show. It's generally whatever we talk about. But one of the things that I absolutely loved, and I wanted to circle back, you said when you were hearing fans say, I cried after this movie for quite some time. I called my parents. There's one scene in particular that hits so close to home. Now, I've got a 12-year-old, and we also have a 10-month-old, right? Huge age gap, right? We weren't even supposed to have one, you know, let alone two, and then 12 years apart. It's crazy. For the first 4 years of my oldest son's life, I was in the military. I was in the Navy. First 6 years of his life, I was in the Navy. But first 4 years, I was consistently deployed. So I didn't get to see him very often. And there's one memory that sticks out, and it's him when I get off of my second deployment. I pull into San Diego, right? And he's maybe 2 years old, maybe 18 months, right? And it's him running down the pier. And I'm going to try to do this without tearing up, but it's him running down the pier. Right? He hasn't seen me in 9 months. I haven't seen him in 9 months. I got to see him in Skype and all that shit when I was overseas, but it wasn't the same as physically being there, right? So I see him running, and he's got his hairs all. That's why I wear a hat. My hair does not sit down. My hair does what it wants to do, so I have to confine it with a cap. So he hasn't even had his first haircut yet, so he's got curls all over the place. He's running down the pier. I can see him in that little blue jacket he's got, right, and he's screaming, "Daddy, daddy, daddy," and he's got his arms up, right. So I pick him up. And then I'm watching, right? So I'm watching the Mitchells versus the Machines, and it's that part where Rick's going back and he's looking at all of these videos after they had the huge fight with 80. And it's that scene where she's running towards him. And then he has this feeling of like, oh shit, man, it's time with kids goes so quickly, right? I'm 33, right? I blink and then I have a 12-year-old. And I'm blinking, and my youngest is almost a year old. So getting to see that and getting to feel that, like, I think 10 years ago, I would have felt a lot differently about that scene in particular. I probably wouldn't have got as emotional as I did. But you guys managed to capture, and I don't know what it is or who thought about that scene or how that scene kind of flushed out. But that scene had to have been written by a parent that's probably going through what the scene explained and what I just explained as far as kids growing up, and then you kind of seeing that I won't say that closeness disappearing between them, because once kids grow up, you're no longer that idol, you're no longer that hero, that person that they absolutely have to go to for everything, because they've got their own identities, they've got their own friends, and they've got all these other new heroes that they look up to. But that scene in particular struck so fucking hard, dude. It was a beautiful scene. How did that scene come about? Do you know? I know, head of story, you got to know something about it. But
well, that scene was, it's funny, like these movies like tend to change, as you probably know, like it's so long to make these movies. So, and there's always like, every scene I think goes through so many like iterations and changes and stuff. That one in particular was the beating heart of the movie. And it was the one that, like, no matter what happened, everything around it would change except that one. Because if we knew that if we tamper with that one, then the whole movie would just, it wouldn't connect. And so I remember, like, I remember Mike writing it, and just like, and it's funny because Mike isn't a dad, but his relationship with his dad is a very powerful one. And then we brought in Hannah Cho, who's one of our first board artists that we had, and she has this skill where she can literally just put pen and paper and she will make you cry. Like that's her strength. That's her weapon. His superpower is doing emotional scenes, and it's funny because it's like that home video has a sort of montage quality. Like, it's not that it's like it's one moment and then another moment. We came up with a bunch of moments, and a lot of them, some of them had comedy in it, and and some of them were like, just Katie and Rick going, Mitchell's climbing through, like, walking through the forest. But I don't know what it was that, like, that when we saw, I think the way it was staged also, like, Hannah Cho did a fantastic job of, like, of the little girl, like, looking at the camera, and then, like, doing the little things with her feet, and then getting into the door and then running towards the dad. I remember seeing that scene, and I was like, this is, if someone were to ask, this is the heart of the movie, what's the heart of the movie, is that moment. And I was like, and when I saw that shot, I was like, this movie's gonna be special. And it's so funny because she's very, like, Hannah Cho is very calm and cool about everything, and so you see Mike sobbing she was pitching the scene, and I'm like just teary-eyed. I'm like, this is so beautiful, and we're like, that's amazing. And she's like, oh yeah, thank you.
Yeah, I know.
And she's very chill, like, it's like, kind of like a cool cat. We're like, that's her thing. And before that, I think we had in the storyboards, when we put it in animatic, we had the sound of like of an actual little girl a home movie of a little girl seeing her dad, and it would just put it in with the boards, and it was just like magic. And we're like, oh, this is perfect. And so, and I'm gonna be very honest with you, there was a moment where, like, I was almost like raising my hand about the scene, because but all of a sudden, like, because I'm the head of story and I had the story math in my brain, I'm like, I was like, oh, if we show the scene, then the movie becomes about Rick instead of about Katie. And but it was a moment where I think everyone was like, you know what, that's totally fine. Because it and in a way, like, we were aiming to make the movie about Katie, but in reality, like it felt like we were watching it from the point of view of a dad who has no way of communicating with her daughter, and not from a negative reason, not for bad reasons. It's just more like a loss in translation situation.
Yeah.
But she's a different generation, and he's a different generation, and he's like trying to
Navigate.
talk to her. Yeah, which I know, like right now, I'm like branching off into different conversations about this particular relationship. But there was a moment where, like, the first version of the movie, Rick was a curmudgeon, and Katie was like, "Fuck you, Dad." Like that. It made us laugh because we're like, "This is funny." It's like the cartoonishly grumpy old dad, and then and Katie being all like whatever, and then eventually they'll fall in love. But like, I think one of the blessings that we got from Phil and Chris was that, like, they really push for, like, for the heart of it.
Mhm.
And if you don't love this family, and it's two negative people fighting with each other, you're, as an audience member, you're gonna be like, oh, I don't like this. But if you're seeing Rick trying his best,
Yeah.
and Katie's like, Dad, just want to watch my movies, and it's just, and they can't get together, and they clash, but it all came from a good place. Then when you see that scene of the whole movies, it lands even better, and so, like, and so, yeah, I mean, I think that for me, that scene was the heart of the movie. And I took the hand down, and I was like, you know what, this scene is perfect. I don't want to mess with it, and it just stayed like that for 5 or 6 years.
That's insane, man. Thank you for sharing that. I really appreciate it.
Of
Now,
course.
I've heard on multiple different, I've heard on multiple episodes of this show where, if a show is in production, like say they're on season 1, they'll have like one mantra or one motto or one ethos for what the show is supposed to be about. It's redemption, or it's trying to find their place in life and all that other stuff. Did you guys have one for the Mitchells versus the Machines, as far as like something you guys always had to go back to and say, hey, this is what we're trying to do? Was there a mantra or a motto that you guys had?
um we had a couple. Let me see. um I think one mantra that we always used to go back to, because, and this is just because me, Mike, and Jeff, we kind of like always used to like write stuff just to make ourselves laugh, and it was always like we would come up with like a bunch of gags that would be hilarious, and then it would be funny. But one thing that was a mantra that was like we learned, I think we learned midway through the production of this movie, was we should always go. It should always be about the family.
Yeah.
And because like we would have moments where we would just go off to pal, and then we would just like have like there's the scene where like the robots are uprising and taking people away. Like that used to be a long scene, and we used to go around the world, and we see like robots doing funny things in London, funny things in China, funny things in Australia. And for some reason, like, we were laughing, but the audience didn't care, because at the end of the day, they were like, just take us back to the family. I'm very curious about the family. And so it helped us, like, it made us realize, like, oh, okay, cool. Like, it's what we think is funny at the end of the day. If it's not tied to the family and the family's journey, then I don't care. Because like right now, like we're like the big question is like, are Rick and Kitty ever gonna connect?
Mhm.
And so that was kind of our big mantra, was like always go back to the family. um Mike had like a whiteboard where he had a tear-o-meter and a laugh-o-meter. And he would always like we would always be like looking at like screenings and people laughing at moments, and we're like, okay, cool. And like, oh, okay, so they laughed at this part, but they didn't laugh at this part. We gotta make things funnier, and then but we gotta make things more emotional. And so we would just, that, like, those three things became kind of our mantras. Theme wise, I don't know if we had one, because I went, I don't know. It's interesting. I feel like if we did have a mantra in regards to theme, maybe the journey would have been an easier one. But like, um, but yeah, for us, it was always about like, always remember, this movie is about the family, not about the robots. It's always like, which that's how that's how I know we made a good film, is because it's like we could replace the robots for zombies,
Mhm.
and it would still tell the same story, and it still feels good, and it still works. So yeah. So I guess those were our mantras, but not necessarily theme tied. But
So out of the two, excuse me, out of Mike and Jeff, who's afraid of AI and who's afraid of the AI uprising?
I want to say without hesitation that it's definitely Mike.
Yeah.
Without question. I think Jeff knows that we're in a good spot. Like, there will be some, yes, he is concerned about the robot uprising, but Mike is the one that I feel is like very, very nervous.
Yeah.
I know because we went to Caltech for research to learn about like robotics and stuff like that. And I remember like the guy was showing us like this legs that were just like very slow.
Oh, yeah.
Like light years away from uprising.
Yeah.
Like it took it like the robot legs couldn't stand up.
Yeah.
So I'm like, okay, cool. They need to rise up first before they can rise up. So and then Mike and then Mike, the guy's like, hey, so yeah, so this is the robots, and then there's a little machine over here. It's like a little like car, and then it's like a yeah, it's really simple stuff, but we're working on it. Well, so any questions? And Mike raises his hands and goes, I have one question. What's your end game? and they're like, oh, sorry. It's like, no, what's the end game? What's the like why robots? Why? And I remember just laughing because I was like, that of course you're the guy who's big in this movie. I mean, of course you're gonna be like hesitant. Like he's just very, very nervous about that stuff. And I welcome them with open arms personally.
So I usually pull I'll pull like a couple clips and then a teaser trailer. This is 100% going to be a clip. Is what's your end game? That's just phenomenal. Is that where that now I usually don't do this, and the only reason I can pull some of the lines or some of these specific moments is because I just rewatched it again because, like I said, I wanted to make sure I was on point with this.
Yeah, of course.
And it's such a fun movie. But is that where that scene with Katie and Rick at the end? He's like, oh man, I'm kind of nervous type of thing. And he's like, Dad, here, use this line. And she says, this is the end, or the end game starts here, or something along those lines. Is that kind of where that came from? You guys?
Oh, that I don't think it came from that. I think that one came from like we knew we wanted like a moment between them, like like just a very like human moment of like, oh, let me say something, and then Katie being able to help him, and almost like you see them together, like, oh my god, they're having a moment. But there was like multiple options. Like it could be the end game has begun, or like time for the battle to begin. But I think the end game has begun. Like for some reason, it was the one that like landed. Yeah. So because I had to remind Mike about it. Like I was like, Mike, you told this to the guy from Caltech. It's like, oh yeah. I mean, I forgot about that. But yeah, 100%. What is their end game?
Oh, that's phenomenal, man. Now, with some of these characters, some of these scenes, man, I got to imagine you being ahead of story. I've heard this term used multiple times when it comes to writers. It's like putting on a pair of shoes or putting on a pair of socks. Some characters folks can slip into very easy, and some people it's like putting on a sock that's maybe a little bit too tight. It gets there eventually, but it's a little bit difficult. So who were some of those characters when writing this and helping progress the story along? Did you feel like, man, it was an absolute fit, easy to jump into, and who were some of the characters that were a little bit more difficult to get into the headspace for?
That's a very good question. Wow. I think Katie was very easy because I think Katie was like us. Like she was a film student, and we know what a film student who's just obsessed with her films and is a little bit OCD about making crazy films. That we know what that is. With Rick, I think Rick was one of the characters that was a little bit more trickier because we thought that like making him a curmudgeon and a grump was gonna be good, but then when we find out that wasn't the case, we then had to like, okay, what is it that we're missing then? Because we don't want to make him too nice, because then it feels like Katie's being intense or abusive or whatever. So finding his balance took a while, and I think one thing I'm good at is that like I know how to take things that can be a little bit like intense. I know how to like give it appeal. I think that's one of my superpowers, and I was able to like find the moments where Rick sounded like he was being a little bit aggressive and like just kind of do something with the expressions of the eyes. Or like like Rick, like in the first dinner scene, Rick was always like this, like his eyebrows were just like constantly frustrated. But then like whenever he was excited about something, instead of like like being aggressive about it, he was like actually I would make the eyebrows more curious. So there was like curiosity instead of like him wanting to like shove the things that he likes on Katie's face. Like it was these subtle things that started to help define who he was. Um, and then that informed Mike. It was like, oh, okay, cool. I think he's kind of like a, and then we try to like push Rick in a place where he was just a full-on goofball, like almost like goofball possible QAnon member. Like, like it was just like it was like, like we he was like, he was very weird and very like intense, and he was like, like the government is out to get us. And that was funny for us, but then it wasn't funny for regular audiences. And so we just took it, like he's still that sort of guy, but like it's almost like we took it down to like, like when he's doing the when he's trying to catch wild game, and he's just like teaching them how to do like oh my god, what's the term? I forgot what it's called.
The snare trap.
The snare trap. Yeah, like I was like, that's as far as we can go, know. And sure, we have but like it's that became a balance that I think it wasn't even until like Danny McBride showed up that almost like that he was like the cherry on top. It's like, oh, there we go, that's what he is. And so surprisingly he became much more difficult than we thought it was. Linda was Linda was pretty simple because like it was based on like on Mike's mom. And Aaron was obscenely simple because that's Mike. Mike was 100%. Yeah, like he was, for him it was super easy to write Aaron because like I still remember him telling us the story of what his soul sister was leaving, and he was like broken inside. I'm sorry, Mike, if I'm exposing you. A lot of you from, that's fine. But he was that he was like, oh, okay, cool. And whenever he would be writing scenes for Aaron, it was like, that'd be perfect. And we had a lot of voice actors come in to do the voice of Aaron. And the reason why I think we went with Mike is I think everyone like was either too cartoony or too kid-like.
Yeah.
And I'm like, there's a subtlety of what Mike does with Aaron, where Aaron is like nervous and a little bit like, a little bit spectrum-y, but also he has a little sassiness to himself, and that only Mike knew how to do. And we've seen kids who have like voices that sound like 40-year-olds, but it just seemed to work for us. And I think those, because even the robots were pretty easy. I think Rick was definitely the hardest one, surprisingly.
So Rick reminded me of Ron Swanson from Parks and Recs, just a little bit more goofier.
Yeah.
I'm so glad you brought up Danny McBride, because I think he is the Swiss Army knife in the Hollywood sphere, the movie sphere. I mean, from why am I forgetting? Eastbound and Down to Tropic Thunder to what was the one with Andy Samberg and he was the stunt man? Just anything Danny McBride. I can't think of that name. I would just watch that again with my kid for the life of me. It'll come to me down the road when we're in the middle of something heartfelt and we're talking about it. I'm like, oh shit, that's what it was. But that you can just plug and play Danny McBride, and you look at him and you see the movies he's done, and most people just think like, oh, he's just a comedy actor. But then you go and you put him behind the microphone and you give him an emotional role like this, like a dad. Like I don't know if Danny's a dad or not. I'm assuming he is. But just the heart that he put into that, it was phenomenal, man. Like I said, I really enjoyed. There wasn't one misstep in this entire movie. And then circling back to Mike being Aaron, him and Munchie were probably my two favorite characters in this entire thing. I'm pretty sure it's like that with almost everything. I can sit there and pick a character and I can like them for a specific reason because I can see myself in that character. But just seeing the interaction between a kid and his dog and a kid that is just balls deep into dinosaurs or something, because I'm pretty sure you can see him back there. I'm a huge Ninja Turtle fan, and that's what I was like with Aaron and dinosaurs. I was like that with Ninja Turtles at that age. I wanted to know everything. I mean, I've got these little bastards all over the place in my office. I just wanted to know everything about them. Somebody would say something and I would somehow make it about the Ninja Turtles, and I would tell them facts that they really didn't need to know, that wasn't going to progress any kind of actual conversation down the road. It was my lifeblood back then when I was young. So I saw myself in them. And then I've got a dog that he's not a pug like Munch. He's not a dog, pig, loaf of bread, which was a phenomenal I loved that whole descriptive thing, and it would make them haywire. But I've got a dog, I've got a male husky. and his name is Diggle. If you ever watched the Arrowverse, I was a fan of John Diggle. David Ramsey is the actor's name. So I have two huskies, a female and a male. One's named Ollie after Oliver Queen, and the other one was named Diggle after John Diggle. So the two characters in the Arrow show. But he is exactly like Munchie. He is he's lovable, very dumb. Like my dog Diggle, he is dumb, right? He's the type of dog. So I have a smoker, right? I'm smoking a pork butt one day. Yeah. And I'm doing the burn off stage. So I've got it ripping hot, 500 degrees, right? So I've got the thing open and I let the dogs out. All of them go past it to go take a piss or shit, whatever they got to do out in the yard. And they come back in, except this dumb fucker, right? He goes over there and I'm hearing him cry. He's licking the hot grates, right? He's trying to get them. Yes, very dumb. So he's licking it and he's crying like a dog. I'm like, get the fuck away, man. It's hot. So I'm pushing him away and I close the door, but I leave the hatch on it, right? So he had somehow found a way to bump it and open it back up and continue to lick it again after he burnt himself. And I'm looking at this dumb fucker. I'm just like, what the hell is wrong with you, dog? I was like, your mother should have eaten you. If this was out in the wild and you were a wolf, your mother would have eaten you a long time ago because you were a detriment to the pack, right? But he's a sweet dog, man. Everybody loves him. We like playing with him, dressing him up. He's just a cool dog. Just he's a little slow. So
I mean, I like that he's slow, but like at the same time, he was able to be smart enough to like.
He's got moments of clarity.
Yeah, that feels very Monchi, to be honest.
Yeah, and it's like I said, I loved the two interactions with them. Him talking about, oh, we got to get him a little tuxedo and a top hat like a gentleman, and then Rick's like, yeah. He's like a gentleman, right? And he was like, yes, Monchi, sit at the table like a gentleman in his tuxedo. It's just little things like that. You just like, oh man, I could see myself acting like this at 7-8 years old, however old Aaron is. I think he's 7-8 years old, somewhere around there. So I could see myself like that. I mean, with these cast of characters, was it difficult finding, not in the voice in the sense of a voice actor or voice actress, was it hard finding the voices for these characters, or was the Bible pretty good and pretty set on how these characters should act and interact and voice and everything with each other?
I think it was pretty set very early on. It wasn't that difficult. Like, and when you say like voice, you mean like its voice.
Yeah, how he would interact or what he would actually do. Because there's so many times you'll see like, oh, that character, that seems out of place for that character. He shouldn't be doing this. So I was just wondering if it was very easy to establish these characters. They had a set kind of a way about them and everything.
Well, yeah, it was. I think the voices were very very well established from the very beginning. Because I remember when Mike pitched me the movie, like I could see the characters very, very well. Mm-hmm. I think Rick was like one thing in particular. I think was that like maybe they were more. They were leaning more towards wacky a little bit in the beginning, but like what you saw was kind of what you got.
Yeah.
And then the journey was throughout those 6 or 5 years was to kind of like go from like just laugh out loud comedic moments, and sometimes will be like a little bit too much, and then like give him a little bit of more humanity, but not too much. Like it was. I've been in productions where like I've seen characters like go through like roller coasters.
Yeah.
But trying to figure out who they are, and these ones were like from the very beginning were very solidified. Pal maybe was one of the ones that like took a while to figure out, because like Pal used to be like a lot more menacing, and then but I think once Olivia Colman came in, I think she added like that sort of craziness.
Yeah,
I think it's like made it it was like a hybrid of like Dr. Claw and I don't know, and Olivia Colman, I guess. But it wasn't that difficult. There was a lot of, I don't know. I would say that a lot of all these characters were very, very, very defined very quickly.
Yeah.
Which is a blessing,
I'm sure.
Happen that up. Yeah.
Yeah. So with Pal, what I absolutely loved, and then when I sent you that picture earlier today, I just thought my kid will usually say like, oh, look at this. He's just talking out of his ass most of the time because he wants to make jokes and shit like that. So I assumed he saw something. And when he saw Pal up there, I'm like, oh shit, the robot rising is happening. It only took a year for this movie to get into production, or it took 6 years to get into production, make it made. And then we're already starting to see him pop up. But what I loved about Pal, and I hate to keep referencing Disney because, like I said, you guys should have won it. However, Pal had this similarity to one of my favorite villains from The Emperor's New Groove, which was Yzma, right? So you could see like how evil she was, but yet how if that makes any sense, how evil, but how playful she was as a villain. And what I loved about Pal, and it was the scene she was put me on the table so I could flip around and be upset. So it's her just yelling. I'm like, dude, I could see that shit. I could, like, if I was a phone and I was evil and shit and I don't have any arms, any legs, put me on the table so I can be upset and I'm just flipping up and down. It was just, it's one of those moments that's just so damn funny. With gags like that, man, where or how do those come about? Or when you guys are flushing out the story, how does something like that kind of make it way in there? I know it's collaborative, so everybody's like, we should do this, we should do this, but how does that come about?
Well, it's a long process because I mean it varies because like sometimes Mike has an idea and it works, and then there's other times where like I think Mike created an environment where like if he would give us the pages for like, hey, there's this joke I have, but at the same time, if you have other better ideas, let me know.
Yeah.
He was not that precious about the script, which created a really cool environment in the story department of like, oh, we can do whatever we want. And I think for us, we did have also well, now that we talk about going back to mantra, you know, like one of the mantras that we had is that the audience was our boss. And so like if we did something, if we had a joke and it didn't land, and then we would just continue going on and on and on. And all those jokes that came from like, you know, we had multiple brainstorms where we're just like kind of like, what is the funniest thing you can do with a phone? That I think went all the way to the very end. Like I think we were like 2 months away from the movie coming out, and we were still like, can we do a off-screen joke? Like, is there a possibility to cram some humor in this? So yeah, so it you know it we had people with different brains that like, you know, approach comedy in a different way. I approach comedy in a very edgy way, but then there's also other people who approach comedy in a more like emotional way. Like for example, like, you know, we had this girl called Quinn Larson. She was a storyboard artist, and she would do like little watercolor like comic strips, and those were like her little thumbnails of like jokes or ideas. And like, you know, I'm here like drawing this disgusting fucking drawings on Photoshop, and she's just like bringing art. Like it's easily be framed, and it's like, oh, this is some of my jokes. And she came up with the idea of whenever a robot like got emotional, that like they would just like kind of draw here with a crayon, and that made it into the movie. And it's just moments where like I think it's like a unanimous. Phil and Chris call it a clean kill. It's like, you know, like the joke has to be like a really solid joke. And then sometimes the way we also worked was in our brainstorms, we would just kind of board it out really quickly and then give it to Mike, and then Mike would put it in editorial, and the editor will like do multiple versions of like the setup of the joke and then the punchline of a joke, and then we would see them all together and just read the room and see which one was the funniest. And that was like that for the whole time. You know, like I still remember the last joke I ever pitched in the movie was that like when Katie finished her speech at the end to Pal was like in the sleep mode, because like we were wondering like what would like what was Pal do, like, oh, this is so boring. I was like, well, oh, maybe it's like, you know, maybe it's in sleep mode or something, and then people were like, yes, and then we just did it, and that was it. So yeah, so I think the process was like a very like welcoming, good one. There was also moments where like I have to agree that me and Mike and Jeff have very dark humor. You know, there was one joke that I think we wanted to put in the movie, but there was no way, there was no space for it, of course, where Pal was telling Mark, humans with phones and technology are problematic and dangerous. And he's like, that's not true. We're not at all. And he's like, oh, okay, that's cool. Let's take, for example, this little thing over here. And then we see a chimpanzee with a handgun, and he's just waving it, and then he's just shooting everywhere. And they're like, it's like, what's going on? It's like, yeah, you humans are like chimpanzees with handguns. You guys are very dangerous. And we were like, we should do that. And then at the same time, we kind of stopped ourselves and we're like, yeah, we're not gonna have a chimpanzee with a handgun in a family film. And so we would just pull it back, and you know, what other jokes? We had a lot of jokes that were like just very, you know, we had jokes where like with the Furbies, where like the Furbies would like say very like like let's kill the humans, but I think Hasbro was like, well, they can't say let's kill the humans, and then we would be like, can we say let the Dark Harvest begin? And they're like, okay, yeah, sure. And I was like, okay, cool. What a happy medium. And so that was fun.
One of the best lines ever.
Yeah, no, and that line came from the fact that's one great thing about some of the jokes is that they came from us unable to do another joke.
Yeah.
Or to be able to do another like moment in the movie where like how do we solve this? And then this thing came about and then it just worked. And it worked really well. And so yeah, there was a lot of like there's so many scenes. There's like a cemetery of thousands and thousands of jokes that never made it. That every time I have a chance, I go to Instagram or Twitter and I post like so many other scenes that like we haven't, they never saw the light of day. But it was a fun experience.
That's something I wanted to circle back to, and there's a few things in there. I definitely want to spend a few minutes to talk about Phil and Chris. The Furby scene was really, really fun. But something that I don't want to say it's sad that it's on Netflix, because Netflix has such a huge range for people that can see this instantly. I mean, would you rather have 200 people see it in a movie theater over the weekend, or would you rather it be open to 200 million people watching it worldwide? What route are you going to take? Netflix is obviously hands down the no-brainer answer, right? However, one thing that I absolutely love, I don't know if they do this, but I don't really buy movies anymore, DVDs or physical copies. But one thing that I absolutely loved to do back in the day was getting to buy the movie that had the director's cut, because I loved watching the movie with folks like yourself and the creators. They would talk and walk you through like what we were thinking during this. Like you're watching the movie, but you're hearing them talk and discuss everything that was going on. Like we shot it this way because of X, Y, and Z. Now with Netflix, do they release movies that are Netflix originals? Do they release them to DVDs, or do they release or put out that content that didn't
make it? They do.
Yeah.
They do, but what I don't know if if that idea came from Sony.
Okay.
If like Sony had the rights to kind of like release it in as a DVD, but I think Netflix was like super on board with it. Because I know a couple of like Netflix movies that are there, and then that was one of our dreams, was to be able to have like if Katie was alive, she would be like, can we make this a Criterion Collection?
Yes.
And can we give us some behind the scenes? And so like we right now, if you go to iTunes, like we tried our best to do like a behind the scenes with like deleted scenes. There's this thing that like I think Phil and Chris do really that I love, that I think they did it in Spider-Verse, which is like an extended version where you have the movie and then boarded scenes of what like the movie what's going to be, and then like other like art, and it's really full. It's great. But yeah, we do have one that I don't know who released it. I don't know. I feel like it was Sony, but I might be wrong.
Okay, that's cool, because that's something that I really wish that Netflix would do, where you could have an option after you watch the movie, after the credits roll, that you can do like what DVDs used to, and you go to bonus features or deleted scenes. I think that'd be a really cool option to have.
I think HBO Max has it.
Yes, right? I just started noticing it with the Batman. I don't know if you've seen the Batman yet.
Yeah.
Phenomenal. Huge Batman. I mean, I'm wearing Batman hoodie on me today. Most of my videos, it's usually cold as hell in my office, because that's how I like it, cold as shit in the house. I'd rather be cold than hot. But Batman, it was a phenomenal movie. So I'll take a look at that, because I'm pretty sure they got some stuff on YouTube too. I noticed a lot of stuff from the movie channels that they have on. So if it's the Visual versus Machines, they'll have their own YouTube channel and they'll put stuff like that up there. But yeah, like I said, it'd be something really cool to see. And then I know they did an Art of the Spider-Verse book, which was a phenomenal book. That movie was so beautiful. Did you guys do an Art of book for the Mitchells versus the Machines?
Yes, we did. Yeah, if you go to Amazon, it's actually like you can purchase it. Just look for Art of Mitchell versus the Machines, and it has the same. I think it's the same company that did the Spider-Verse one, and one of our goals was just to try to cram as much art as possible.
Yeah,
like as many boards as possible, as many viz dev, and many character designs, background art, and yeah. So now it's available over there. In the early days when we used to be called Connected, they were selling. The people apparently got books that said the Art of Connected,
Yeah.
and it's the same art of book. But when they rechanged the name, it just went back to Mitchell. So some people have connected the Art of Connected, and some people have the Art of Mitchell's versus the Machines.
Well, it sounds like I got to buy both now to be a completist. You know what I mean?
Oh, absolutely, 100%, yeah.
Good. Well, I got that one started, so I've been buying a lot of those as of late. Just trying to get into the anime, like doing this podcast for 2 years. I noticed a very long time ago that I'm way behind the curve when it comes to just animation history. There is so much shit out there that I just trying to download and put in here. So when I talk to you guys and gals, it doesn't sound like I'm an idiot, right? So when I talk, I like to come from at least a little bit of a place of knowledge or a little bit of place of understanding. That way, like I said, I just don't want to sound dumb on this thing. But I've really enjoyed these art of books because you get to, it's like that deleted scene or bonus footage. You get to see what the creator, what the writers, what the artists were really thinking, and why this color was chosen to be red instead of blue. I like seeing that type of stuff. I like seeing how people's brains work. But going back to Phil and Chris, man, what was the biggest thing you learned from them when they came on to do this, to help out with this movie and help produce it and everything? What was some of the big things that you took away as far as their tutelage and learning from them? What was something that stands out to you?
There are multiple things. I remember that like when they first came in, they're very open about saying this. They're like, by us coming in, we are going to make the movie worst before it gets better, because they like to be wrecking balls and then but they had there was something very interesting like that I learned from them, which is once you bore something out, you might like it, but it's good to continue exploring, because some things that you kind of develop, you look at them and you're like, that feels pretty good, but in their brains they're like, no, what will make it feel great?
Mm-hmm.
And we're like, oh, okay, we can. I mean, can we try? And then I realized that like through them I learned that it's like, yes, you can try, because now you have this thing already works. Now let's put it here and let's try different versions. If none of these versions work, we can always go back to this.
Yeah.
But like you might end up discovering something that you would never think you would find, because you kind of like settled for something. And that was like a huge learning lesson. And for me, it was like, they're very honest about comedy. They're very like, if there's something that doesn't make them laugh, like Phil is very open. He's very like, why am I not laughing? Why am I not enjoying this right now? And we're like, and then we're like, okay, we'll make it. We'll find ways. And they came from a place where like there's a very improv-y quality to the creation and coming up of ideas, which I'm a huge supporter of. The idea of like, because I've seen scripts where like it's like, this is the script and it's gonna say this way, and you won't be able to tamper with it because that's my vision. But sometimes your vision might be wrong, buddy. I don't know. Sometimes like, that's why the movie something didn't do well, because it didn't connect. And so like to be able to like take a script and just break it into pieces and then find it in that editor in the edit bay, like it was like it was a fun, it almost felt like a very chaotic like punk, it's like punk rock way of doing filmmaking that I'm obsessed with. And but at the same time, like they were like that about like, about the comedy, but especially about the heart.
Yeah.
Because I think we always, like me and Mike and Jeff, we always got something to lean too much into comedy, and they were the ones who were always reminding us that it's like, make me care for this family. And I know we've heard this a lot of times, but like it's true. Like, at the end of the day, you want to love this family.
Yes.
You want to.
You're rooting for them.
You want to root for them, yeah. And if you're making characters in their world, you kind of want to love the characters. Like, if you, because there's a misconception, well, not a misconception. I think it's just a different way of making films, where the character is very unlikable, and by the end, we end up liking the character. And so I think that what their approach is, the way they do things is that like, it's like, no, I think I kind of want to like the character from the very beginning, because if not, I won't care for him. If he turns good at the end, or if she turns good at the end, good for them. But I want to be able to fall in love with them, especially when we're doing a family. And I think when they came in and then gave us all these like nuggets of wisdom that it helped us make the family a more the family went from being like a little bit of a wacky family to being like a wacky family that was very
Cool.
realistic and very grounded and
Mhm.
very familiar. Um, and so like it just that helped us a lot. And I knew, like they always say, like don't meet, like Mike always says this, and I will agree with him. They say don't meet your heroes, and and but I was like, I met my heroes and they seem great, and now we're friends, and they see filmmaking the same way we see filmmaking. Yeah, it was wonderful. And it's so funny because like they're very like they're huge cheerleaders, and to the point that like the movie's done and they're like, nope, we can continue adding more jokes in. And it's like, oh, can we? Okay, if you guys say yes, we'll continue. I don't know, man. So yeah, that's I think one of the, like some of the biggest things that we're gonna gain from them. Um, that hopefully we'll implement it to our next films.
No, that's really cool, man. I'm really looking forward to it. Excuse me. And the last thing I wanted to circle back to, which is probably, I told you how much that scene with Rick and little Katie going through the years of the family movies really meant to me. But one scene in particular that I laughed so fucking hard at was the mall scene with the Furbies. What does it feel like to, what was more rewarding, almost winning that Oscar or making Furby relevant for the first time in 30 years, man? What did it feel good bringing Furby back? What did that feel like to you?
There is no question about it that the best thing was bringing Furby
You guys got
back.
Furby trending.
Yes, like you can melt 17 different Oscars and make it into one giant Oscar, and it will not be as gratifying as making that scene. Because I remember we were making that scene, and when we were doing it in the boards, like it was like this is fucking wild.
Yes.
It was fucking crazy. And I kept telling Mike, like, I'm like, do we have the rights to the Furby? And he was like, yeah, that's fine. Let's keep going. Let's
We'll
just make
figure it out.
ourselves laughs. And we did. And then as you know, as we started getting closer into production, it's like, so do we have the Lego? And I was like, nah, I guess we're gonna have to like talk to Hasbro now. And Hasbro, I think it took a while for us to communicate with them. But then eventually Hasbro approved, and then as the approval came to be, we started like lighting stuff up. That's when things started getting very fucking serious. Because
Yeah.
like while you're watching this in the boards, you're like, this is silly. But then you're having people in Canada and in LA, and they're like building the Furby. I'm like, there's a wow, they built a Furby, okay. And then like they light it, and then they animate it, and then they add these special effects. Which, by the way, I for some reason this is such a weird thing. I thought the Furbies had like little sparklers in their mouths, and my wife was like, "No, they don't. Where did you get that idea?" I'm like, "Oh, never mind. Okay." And so they kind of like spit sparkle, and that's what justified the laser.
Yeah.
And by that time that I was like, "Oh, they don't do that," it was too late. Like they were already lighting the giant Furby. And I remember one of the days I remember the most was like them putting all of the pieces together in editorial, and Phil turning around to Mike and saying, "Don't say you don't get everything in life, man. Like you literally have a scene with a Furby shooting lasers at a mall, destroying half of the whole mall. Like this is an animated movie, and I think it was just like it was like this is just a crazy concept. But then when they added music and they added like the sound effects, I was like, this is the best, this is I've reached Nirvana, I've reached the pinnacle of whatever of art. Um, but it was such a gratifying thing that almost didn't happen. And we used to have like that gap between finding out if like finding out when we were finding out if we could get the rights to the Furby, we were coming up with different ideas. We were just like we had screenings where we had Tickle Me Elmo's, which was this like Tickle Me Elmo ripoff that was kind of like an Immortan Joe from Mad Max, and he had created his own
That's more terrifying than the Furby, by the way.
yeah, it was a new world order that he created with all the appliances. By this time, the appliances had come to life early on in the movie. So by the time that we got to the mall, they had their own ecosystem and they had their own rules. And it was like Lord of the Flies with appliances. And then like when the family got captured, you see this cloaked figure walk in, and then he takes off the cloak and his Tickle Me Elmo with a robotic hand, which is not a robotic hand. It was just like this that the fur in his arm was gone,
It's like
and
a Terminator.
yeah, like Terminator, and he would just be like, he would just say like, and that's how, like lamb to the slaughter, you have brought me this family, and then some toy tickled him, and he was like, and he would slap that toy, and we were like, this is insane, and we were obsessed with it. And we changed it to other things, like we went to like this character called Kawaii Kitty, which was like a Hello Kitty
Yeah.
spinoff, and she would just be like chanting and like shooting lasers at the family, and they were all funny, but they were never the Furby. Like, it was like, it's not the Furby. And then when the rights came to be, and we're like, yeah, you guys can use it. Um, we had a screening at the studio, and when Furby popped up on screen, it was like a thunderous applause of like, yes, it's back, and everyone was so happy. And we're like, okay. So it was a bad mistake to do anything else other than the Furbies. Yeah, that was a good day.
Yeah, I got to imagine, man, that feeling must have been amazing. But just how that scene started with the little toaster coming out, toast popping up, says your toast. He's like, oh, cute. And then there's an arrow pointing up, and then just hilarity ensues. That scene, and I tell everybody, because whenever I go and recommend something, like I'll say, especially at work, because I'm one of those guys, I'm 33 this year. For the most part at work, with the exception of like anime, nobody really watches animation at work.
Yeah.
But I try to get on board and watch what they watch. That way, when I recommend something, they'll watch what I want, or what I watch, or what I recommend. And whenever I sell somebody on this movie, I literally tell them the Furby scene, and then like all you had to say was Furby's becoming vengeance at night, and he's like, we're sold. I was like, the dark heart. It was just everything about that entire scene. It was worth the price of admission alone. It was a phenomenal. It was probably my favorite scene of anything I've seen. Better part of a decade, man. That entire
That's
sequence,
great, man.
fucking great, man.
Yeah, no, it's we wanted, like, the inspiration of that whole scene was Mike saying the mall scene should feel like the Mines of Moria, and with all like the appliances and toys, and I'm like, I can't believe I'm getting away with this shit. So it was exciting, and it was exciting to make, and I'm happy that it's been so well received.
Yeah, man. Like I said, it was fun. All right, so we've been going for about an hour, so I figure what we can do is we could switch over to some of the fans' questions, man. Like I said, I absolutely love this movie. There's so many people that love this movie. You guys should have. I've said it 100 times now. You guys should have won the fucking Oscar. I hope whenever you guys do, whether it's a sequel or you guys do something else, I hope the entire team that was for the Mitchells versus Machines stay together, because you guys did something so special. You guys brought magic from your fingers to from here to down your arm to your fingers, and to the pad and pen you wrote on, to drawing. You guys made something so beautiful and so special, and I can't thank you guys enough for it, man. It was a real honor to see your movie.
Well, it's a real honor. I mean, thank you so much. I mean, this is better than any statue.
Yeah.
There's a fact that people were like so fucking touched about the movie, and that a crazy idea was like well received, and people were like, I hear you.
Yeah.
I know what you're trying to do, and I respect you for it. It means the world to us. So thank you so much. It makes us so happy.
I'm glad to hear that, man. I think the Oscar should be replaced by the Furby, man. See if Mike can make some real trophies for you guys, and instead of that little Oscar man on there, they can put a Furby on there for you. I think it's time.
I think legally we can get away with it. We can
Yeah, we just won't tell anybody. We won't share it on.
Yeah.
But so there's two questions that before we get to the fans' questions that I like doing. I just started not implementing, but I started bringing them up because I hear so many people that talk about their inspirations, right? Like whether it's art or whether it's street art, whether it's animators. So if you had not hypothetically, because I mean there is a real Mount Rushmore, but if you had a Mount Rushmore of animators or artists or people that inspired you in the animation field, who would be your 4 that you would pick plus 1 for an honorable mention? So 5 animators that and they don't have to be animators, they could be writers, they could be you know something like that. So who would be on your Mount Rushmore, and who would be your honorable mention?
I would say Ward Kimball would definitely be up there. and then not animator but writer is John Swartzwelder from
Mhm.
The Simpsons. He was every single episode he did, I was obsessed with. Um, oh man, this is oh gee. Um, and oh, damn it, this is so hard. Um,
And by the way, before you say this is not a slight up against anybody else. This is just people,
no, yeah,
because obviously you probably have hundreds of people, and trying to boil it down to just five is really difficult. So I want to make sure everybody knows that.
it's really difficult. Because to be honest with you, and this, and I don't want to say this because I work with them, but I think the two other spaces should be
Yes.
Phil and Chris.
Yeah.
Like I still remember where I was where I saw Cloudy,
Yes.
and what that film did for me on a personal level as a student of animation, I was like, nothing against any other studio, but it said, oh, we can do things a little bit differently.
Yeah.
And that's all I kind of wanted to hear as an artist and as a filmmaker. I was like, okay, thank you. So I think though, like it's Ward Kimball, John Swartzwelder, and Phil and Chris, and then the fifth mention. Oh man. Oh Jesus. Uh the fifth mention. Oh God. I'm gonna say this because and he's also a friend, so like whatever. But like Thurb Van Orman.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's my fifth mention. I think just yeah, I got a chance to work with him and like just like I used to love his stuff before, but then you know, but I still think he's like one of the funniest people ever. And yeah, it's so tough because there's so many. There's so
It
many.
is. It is. So I just had Linda Semensky on, and Linda Semensky was the second time I've had her on. She was the producer that pretty much had a hand in everything from Dexter's Lab to Samurai Jack to Dinosaur Train to Hey Arnold to anything on Cartoon Network at that time. And I asked her this question, and I've asked this question a few times, but it's always interesting to see what people say because, like I said, I'm still a student in a sense that I want to know where and how animation and who's elevated, who's taken it to new levels. So whenever you guys have those people that are on your Mount Rushmore, maybe I've heard of Phil and Chris, but I haven't heard of certain people that people bring up. So I always write those names down, and then I get to go watch YouTube videos or I get to read about them. I mean, my Mount Rushmore's it's I don't want to say it changes, but there's always a constant to it. I might bring somebody in because I'm like, oh shit, this person is the reason that this person was on here. So I kind of got to take
Yeah.
that person off. But I mean, it's always been Gendy. Gendy's always been my favorite animator. I mean, getting to see a little redheaded dude. Now, I don't want to make it sound like just a white dude saying, oh, there's no representation for me, because that's not what I'm saying. But seeing a kid like that looked like me, and this is why it's so important. Things like Black Panther were so important, because for the first time, not a generation, excuse me, a group of folks got to see somebody that looked like them in a fucking superhero. Yeah. And Black Panther was like, I got goosebumps now. But fucking from the colors that they used of Wakanda, just the blues, the purples, the pinks, all of that neon stuff, it was just so fucking cool. And then just to get to hear some of my friends that talk about that movie, like, right, so we would always Wakanda forever. We'd walk by each other, we bark at each other, man. So it was shit like that. It was so fun. And then seeing this character, because from such a young age, I loved flea markets growing up, right? My mom always took them to us, those Goodwill, shit like that. And then my grandpa was one of those dudes that would like peel off a 20 back in the 90s and shit when we go to the flea market. And then he'd give me a $20 bill and my younger brother a $20 bill. And he's like, go find something at the flea market that makes you happy. And this is before eBay. So everybody just thought comics were bullshit. You'd get a trash bag full of comics for like $3, right? Sometimes the covers were missing. They all smelled like cigarette smoke and bad decisions. Yeah. But you would just get all this stuff, and then I'd start reading them, and that's where I saw T'Challa for the first time. I got to see Luke Cage, I got to see Blade, I got to see all of these crazy characters. Daredevil, She-Hulk's always been my favorite Marvel character. So I got to see all of these different characters at such a young age, and then getting to see, somebody that looks like me, even though there's a lot of stuff out there for folks that look like me. I got to see Dexter, and then I got to see Samurai Jack, which I could not have appreciated at such a young age. Like 12 years old when Samurai Jack came out, I could not have appreciated it. I went back and watched it as an adult, and I'm just like blown away. It's so far, like he is 20 years even 30 years ahead of his time on that show.
Oh, yeah.
So Gendy's always been up there. Jorge Gutierrez is another guy. That guy's made me cry more times than probably any other animator out there.
Yeah.
Just his beautiful work, man. Mark Davis was always my favorite out of the 9 old men from the Disney days. I love his artwork is just fucking beautiful. And then
he was the one that I felt that Milk Call was the most jealous of, I think, in my opinion.
yeah.
So that's good to know. See Milk Call, like he was like, oh,
It's just his work was so beautiful, so inspirational. And then, like I said, I said something different with Linda last night as far as my honorable mention, but Craig Bartlett for Hey Arnold and Craig McCracken kind of tied for me. Hey Arnold was so influential when I was younger.
Oh yeah.
And then Craig McCracken, with everything he's done, his art style is so beautiful. Like his direction for art is one of, like, you never see one of his shows look exactly the same. Like everything is completely different. And
100%, yeah.
when he was on the show, he told me about that, because I always wondered, like, why does sometimes you could see somebody, they do something like, oh, that's a Gendy style, or oh, that's a Jorge style, or oh, that's a such and such style. When you see Craig's, you're like, holy shit, Craig's name is popping up. It looks completely different than what it looked like from his last project. And that's just so innovative. But yeah, those are always been, my guys at the top of the list, man.
That's a great list.
What's that?
That's a fantastic list.
Yeah. It'll change next week, I'm sure. Gendy, like I said, for sure always stays up. And the other guy I always put up there is Danny Antonucci, for the creator of Ed and Eddie, because that's my old plushy plank back there, man. It's just that was something special about that show. And the next one, man. So I started doing this with Randy because Randy's set up so many, like, hey, you should really go and talk to this person. So this is the animation recommendation. Who would you like to see on the What's in My Head podcast? If you had to roll the dice to say, hey, you should check out this person, who would you say they would have a good time on the show?
Oh boy. That's a good question. The reason why I'm just quiet is just because there's so many people. I feel like you're gonna have a fantastic time with Mike Rianda.
Yeah.
He is going to talk your ear off in a good way. He has an energy that's fantastic. I think talking to like Phil or Chris Miller, like those are really good. Yeah, like that's interesting. Like I think there's 2 other people that I'm really close friends with that I think are always fun to talk to. There's 3 people. Well, I'll go with that. There's Miguel Hiron. He was a storyboard artist for Spider-Verse.
Okay.
He's fantastic, and I always have great conversations with him. Caitlyn Van Arsdale. She was one of our board artists at Mitchell's.
Mm-hmm.
And she used to work at she used to work at Powerpuff Girls, and right now she's directing some other stuff. I think she's a fantastic person to have. And then Lauren Sasson. We used to work at We Bear Bears together. She was a creative director of We Bear Bears for a while. She is, just like, these are people that you can just have a nice, lovely conversation with.
Yeah.
And they're full of a lot of information. And yeah, it's just, I know, oh man, there's so many people. Another person is and then I'll stop, is Lindsay Olivares, our production designer.
Okay.
Yeah, she has a wealth of information and wisdom, and loves to talk like I do. So
beautiful. That's cool, man. I'll make sure I check them out. And then we're gonna rotate into the fans. Thanks for mentioning those people. It's always fun. And like I said, I'll reach back out, because one thing's fun when I have friends of people that I've had on. How I get some really, really good stories. I'm like, hey man, you had you were such and friends, like, you had any cool stories to tell? So whenever I get some of these on, I'll reach back out, because I've heard some of the coolest stories, because Randy was like, hey, when you have Robert on, or vice versa, when you have Randy on, like, ask him about this. And it's always funny to see them like, oh shit, I was hoping he wouldn't make me talk about that one, but now that he's done it, you mentioned it, talk about it. So I'll make sure I reach out and
of course
get it. So all right, so we got some real good ones here. One of my favorite ones was coming from a fellow animators, Shaquem Wynn. He wanted to know, how did you get so much squash and stretch out of the digital characters?
That's interesting. That's a good question. definitely like just like the rigs. I mean, that's the magic of like I didn't get to tackle with that because mostly I did mostly storyboarding, but like a lot of the people from ImageWorks, it's a place where they worked on Spider-Verse, but they also worked on Hotel Transylvania. And so like the rigs and the and all the tools that they have up there are insane. Are some of the best in the world to be able to have so much range. Like, because something I keep forgetting about Sony ImageWorks is that like the same person who animated Drac who might have also animated like done some creature animation for like a live action sci-fi film, but it's also doing something for Spider-Verse or for Spider-Man. And so like there's so many amazing tools up there. And so I mean I think that's just the amount of like bones and rigs. I might be like there might be like someone from rigging who's like Guillermo's destroying my department by his explanation. But I think you just get like extra you just get a lot more rigs and a lot more like bones and joints that you can move around and stretch and and we also try to like you say Ed, Ed and Eddie and in a way Mike had mentioned when he wanted to make when he was making this film that Ed, Ed and Eddie or like Beavis and Butthead were all inspirations for this film.
Yeah.
That sort of messiness that the movie has, and like if you close up on the pupils of the Mitchells, no pupil is similar to the other one, and so like because it kept that sort of like almost like like Lindsay Olivares aesthetic that is very similar to Ed and Eddie. It's kind of TV, which is like a very specific looking characters. Since if you think about like sometimes animation and feature, a lot of the characters have a generic look to them, and so like we use a lot of like Ed and Eddie, a lot of Cartoon Network inspiration to help us define how these characters move and act and everything. So hopefully that answered the question.
That's really cool. And before I forget, because you brought up We Bare Bears, absolutely love it. My son and I watched that religiously.
Oh, nice.
Such a fun show. And I mentioned her name just a little bit ago. But do you know Linda Simensky?
I don't know Linda Saminsky.
Okay. So she's over at Duolingo now, but she started out in Nickelodeon. She's been executive producer on, like I said, almost everything from Ed. She was the big reason that came to Cartoon Network, Vice Nickelodeon. Her and Danny Antonucci were real close. But Craig McCracken, she's the reason the Powerpuff Girls came. I mean, she had to go out there and say, "Hey, there's something here," because it didn't test well. It tested twice and it just didn't test well. And she was like, Craig was working on Dexter at the time. She's like, "Make it funny like you do with these boards." She's like, "There's something here for the Powerpuff Girls," right? So she was that driving force. That Foster's Home, she was on there for like the first season, but everything from Samurai Jack to all that stuff. And she brought up We Bare Bears last night, and because I was asking her what some of the newer stuff that she really enjoys, and she brought that show up specifically. So I wanted to say there's somebody out there that absolutely loved We Bare Bears.
That's great. That's fantastic.
Yeah. Like I said, it's a fun show. So Nicholas John apologize if I pronounce your last name wrong. Puzinga, what was the hardest part of the film to plan out in storyboard form? And is it true that storyboarding is often considered to be he put the and capitalized the hardest field to work in for animation? So the first part, what was the hardest part to film, plan a storyboard form?
There were multiple sections, but the ones that I remind the most are, and I'm just using the codes that we said like for and to define a scene, the 1100, and which was the scene where the dumb robots show up, and then the actual robot attack was actually one of the hardest ones. The reason why the first one was hard, like the dumb robots, is for some reason like we kind of wanted the family to just like say we're gonna save the world. Like after the whole like attack and in the dino stuff happened, we wanted the family to say like let's go save the world and then go off and then that's it. But for some reason, like Katie trying to explain to her dad why we should go out and save the world became insanely difficult, really difficult to do, and we don't know why. And I don't know if it was that we were like Katie was like, oh, I have an idea, I'm gonna trick my dad into like go for us, and I'm gonna trick my dad into, I'm gonna convince him that we have to go save the world if I lie to him or whatever. And it was just like it was so complicated, and there were so many things that had to happen in that scene. We had to have that moment that was captured by the security camera where we see Katie lying that like she doesn't care about the whole connecting with her dad. But for some reason, every time it would screen that scene, that's the moment where like everyone would just try to kind of like going to the bathroom, like that's, and so, and sometimes those scenes ended up being like really long. And we're like, why is it so long? And we haven't even got to the robots yet. Like the first versions of that scene, no joke. So before we even saw the dumb robots, there were early versions where we saw a car and we think that the robots are gonna pop out of it, and then it's revealed that it's the vice president of a fake vice president, and and we had it, and we thought he was funny because he was like, I'm a vice president, no one respects me no one respects me at all. And he learned he learned how to find self-respect through the journey with the family. But then as we were watching and realized, oh wow, we are in minute 40 something, and there has not been a damn robot in this entire film. And the movie's called Mitchells versus the Machines. And so we removed the that guy, and then we brought the president, and that didn't work. And then we brought the dumb robots, and then like it just took a while. It was just a process that took way longer than it needed. And then eventually, like there was moments where like we're trying to find out how the robots will tell the Mitchells about like the kill code. And we were just it took forever. But then one day we were like, what if the robots just say it? Yeah. What if there's a dumber robot that goes like, oh, there's a closer there's a place that you can actually download the kill code, and it's in this mall. Yeah, but you can never survive. It's actually 80 miles away. And we learn in that scene that if it's exposition that is hidden in a joke, the audience won't even care. They'll be like, oh, okay, that was funny, but you got information from it. So that was like one of the hardest scenes. For some reason, to this day, I'm still going like, why was it so hard? Now, that was hard, but the hardest for me, without question, was the Dinosaur scene. And it was because it was the search of the tone of the movie was going to be. Because it was the first time that the robots got to attack. It was the first time we see a robot attacking humans. And the first version of it was very R-rated, because you saw the robots and they would shoot lasers at the people, and then people will fall on the ground and they wouldn't wake up. They were stunned, but I never said like they were stunned, so people looked like they were dead. And the first screening, they were like,
this got dark quick.
This got dark quick. Are people dead? And we're like, no, they're stunned. And then I was like, oh, okay, cool. They look like they're dead. I'm like, okay, I'll fix it. And so my way of fixing it was keeping the scene the way it was, and then having a POV of the robot that said stunned.
Yeah.
And then they shot the people, and then by the end, people are like, no, you did that, but that I'm still looking at dead people. Yeah. I'm like, okay. And then we added a scene eventually where like I was like, where me and Mike were like, where do they put the humans? Do they carry the humans? And I was like, oh, let's put them in trucks. And so we had a pile of bodies inside a truck, and it was just like, it's so dark. And then one, I was like, oh, they look like they're dead. I have an idea. And so I had one guy going, oh, what's going on? And that was it. And then still, it was like too dark. Yeah. So we went the opposite direction, and we made it very bubbly, and the song was very whimsical. And then like when they shot them with lasers, it was like a bubble that was very round and bubbly and kind of like circular. And then I remember Mike Moon, who was one of our executive producers at that time, saw that and was like, yeah, don't ever show this clip to anyone ever in your life. This is horrible. This is atrocious. And so from that point on, it was all about like how to strike the tone that said, this is an apocalypse movie, but it's a fun apocalypse movie for families. Because we didn't want to make The Road for kids, because the first thing that we talked about was like, let's make Children of Men, but for kids. And I'm like, that's going to be fucking hard, So it took a while, and it went from like multiple robots to two robots. Sorry, to one robot. But for some reason, that one robot looked like it was like Jason Voorhees, like kind of just basically like walking and killing people. Yeah. And then we were like, well, let's make it two robots. And so we made it two robots. And after two robots, we found a right song that was more like upbeat but still like a little bit tense. And we're like, it's working. And then the big change was Lindsay Olivares and her team kind of did a color palette on the scene that had like a very tropical colors. Yeah. There's a lot of oranges, a lot of pinks, a lot of purples. And that brought the tone. But it took for fucking ever to get that theme right.
Beautiful, man. Lil Attack Pug wants to know, Munchie solo film, when?
Good question. So Solo Pug, is that his name?
What's that?
What was the name? Was the username?
It was Lil Attack Pug.
Little Attack Pug? Yeah. That will be a dream. I don't know, at some point. I remember wanting to pitch an idea of a short that came with the DVD where it was you would just see highlights of the movie, but through the point of view of Manchi. Because through the whole movie, he's very happy.
Yeah.
So it's just like imagining, like, just like I wanted to do one where it was just like him seeing people getting captured, but they're all happy because he thinks everything that everyone's just playing. But we never got a chance to do it. So, but if we get to do it, that will be amazing.
Yeah, well, stay tuned, Lil Pug, or Lil Attack
Yeah.
Pug.
Yeah.
Yeah. China Shop Bull. Yeah, here we go. I watched this with my kids, and we talked about his second part. So I'll just read this first part. I watched this with my kids, and the joke about the stock photo of the family that came in the frame made my 7-year-old daughter laugh so hard she peed her pants. So she really enjoyed it.
That's great.
Yeah. Here we are. What's more challenging, a head of story? What's more challenging as a head of story, drawing or writing?
I would say writing, just coming up with the idea, because I think once you have the idea, is like drawing it. I think for me personally, like I know visually what I want to say, but the content creation of it is sometimes like the more trickier thing. And it's not about, surprisingly, sometimes people say like, oh, I have no ideas of what to write. I think it's the opposite. I think it's that we have so many possibilities of what it can be. Let's figure out which one is the right one. But then I started to learn that if I do have a bunch of ideas, or even if they're not right, even if they feel like a little bit wrong from the very beginning, just putting them out there might be the best thing to do. And so like sometimes, like, I would have this idea that doesn't match with the movie, but for some reason there's a little kernel of something that makes Mike go, oh, what if we do this thing? Basically, can't do this, but what if we do this? And then that sets off like a chain of events that immediately make me go, oh, I think I know what I want to write down. So yeah, I think that's definitely the difficult part. Because visually, I think I once you know what you want, I think once I know what I want, I'm able to like do it in a very quick way. It's like I think this thing. So yeah.
Beautiful. And then
and in regards to that, I have a story about the photo, by the way.
Go for it. Tell us.
So I remember we had like the photo took a while to get made. That joke like we had went through a bunch of iterations, because we tried to draw like the perfect, like, oh, what about, like, I came up with a joke like 5 years ago of like of Lena in a scene. Lena just said like, oh, we have all these pictures and you two are always arguing, and I was like, well, what if like there's a photo that's like the perfect family, but it's not it's not them, and it's like a stock and it's a stock photo, and that worked. But then like the first version was a hand-drawn version of the perfect family, and then it was like, oh, it's not funny yet. I'm like, oh, I get it. I know what it is. And I just use an actual photo of human people. And it was like, oh, okay. Like, so that way the joke landed immediately. You're like, oh, that's really funny. Mike then, after that, wanted to get once legal started happening, we needed to find a family. And apparently we couldn't find a family. And they were like, oh, maybe we can like draw something, or draw them in such an uber realistic way that like, we don't have to use that particular family. We did that and it didn't work. It wasn't as funny. And then Mike decided to hire a private investigator to find where the family was, because we couldn't find a family. And so that private investigator didn't work. But then he told Mike, hey Mike, I can't do it. That being said, there's this guy whose nickname is the Wolf, who's really good at finding these people and finding that you're looking for. And so I think the Wolf was able to find a family in Australia, and I think that's how it happened. Like, Mike was telling me the story, and I was like, wait, for the joke, you hired a private investigator? And he was like, yeah, man. And I was like, and this is why I will die with you till, I will die with you in battle. So yeah.
What part of the budget is that coming out of? That's what I want to know. Like, where do they see it on the ledger? They see private investigator fucking photo. That's so great.
I have no idea, and I feel like if I say it, like I'll probably get into trouble. I don't know. That's a joke, but I have no idea. I wonder if Mike just like took it out of his budget. Like he just like
Yeah.
out of his pocket. Like that feels like an out of a pocket decision. Like you don't go to the lawyer, you don't go to the producer, and go like, "Hey, so hear me out. That joke, boy, does it land? Oh boy." So the only way we're gonna get that joke is if we find his family that's so elusive. I don't know. I don't know what it was, but
I feel like you guys should have made like another invitation to the Oscars, and you guys should have brought the wolf with you. That is one of my favorite stories I've ever heard on the show. So thank you.
Yeah, I was like, that's amazing.
All right, last one here, and oh man, I feel like we should just end it on that one because that is great, man. So thank you for sharing that. So Bruno.life.94 wants to know where the idea of Aaron loving, I'm pretty sure this one's obvious, but where did the idea of Aaron loving dinosaurs come from? Thank you. Yeah, is how he ends it. But dinosaurs, was that a Mike thing? Mike liked a dinosaur?
That's a Jeff thing. I think Jeff was obsessed with dinosaurs and is obsessed with dinosaurs and is obsessed with roller coasters. And a fun fact, like there's a character from the show Clarence.
Yes, I love Clarence.
That Jeff, that's the co-director of Mitchell's. He was obsessed with it's based on him. It's based on his obsession with with roller coasters and dinosaurs and all that stuff. That's him. He was the one that was super, super obsessed. Mike, I think, was obsessed, but like I think all the information of like I would write down like, oh, this is a T-Rex, and he'd be like, no, that's not T-Rex, man. The actual name is this fucking thing. And I'm like, oh, okay, sorry. I didn't want to upset the paleontologists around the world. But yeah, no, he was the one that was obsessed with dinosaurs, and but I think Mike was the one. I might be wrong, but I think Mike was the one that came up with the joke of hi, would you like to talk to me about dinosaurs? Okay, no, thank you. Because I think Mike used to do that, but instead of dinosaurs, it was calling all the GameStops, being like, hi, do you guys want to talk about this video game? Oh, okay, never mind, that's all good, thank you. And he will call every other one, going like, hey, you guys want to talk about this video game? No? Oh, okay. And so he just merged those two worlds to make that one joke.
Oh, it's phenomenal when you can take real life and you can put it into something you're working on. Life imitates art, and art imitates life. It makes it realistic, and the fact that he was scratching shit out of a phone book was just phenomenal.
And then the movie started that way, so you immediately go like, oh, I get this movie now. Mm-hmm. So yeah,
that's phenomenal, man. So we've hit the end, man. Where can people come and find you on the old social medias if they want to say, hey man, I really enjoyed what you work on, or if they want to see what you're working on down the road, where can they come and find you out on the internet?
Well, I'm on Twitter. I'm gonna have to open it up to be able to know what I'm on Twitter, and I'm on like Instagram. And my name is Billy Bob Martinez, because I found out that Guillermo is Bill and Roberto is my middle name. And then one of my friends was like, are you Billy Bob? I'm like, oh fuck, I am Billy Bob. And so that became my thing, is like, my name is gonna be Billy Bob Martinez. And I'm on Instagram and on Twitter, and in both I'm always uploading stuff that like every time I'm like going to the computer and looking and finding like a deleted scene or aborted scene from Mitchell's, I'm always posting it. Like so if you want to see or know more about like some of the scenes that never made it, then you can go there and and look at my stuff. And then in regards to like work and things I'm doing now, right now I'm directing and writing some projects at Sony. I can't say much about them, but like they're very exciting, and hopefully in the near future I can talk more about them.
I'm pretty sure you'll be able to. And all of the links for all of your social media will be in the description. So ladies and gentlemen, you can just go point and click. You don't have to type it out. I make it really easy for you. You just go and click, and then you hit follow, or whatever the hell the other one is. What do you do now? Follow on Twitter. I think it's follow on Instagram as well. So you guys can just go to his page and hit follow and get some really good Mitchell vs. Machine content, as well as whatever's coming out next, man. There's no better way to end this show other than saying, I almost fucked up your name. Guillermo. Guillermo. It's been a fucking blast, man. Like I said, Randy, I appreciate you putting in a good word for me. This has been real fun. Like I said, this movie was real special, and I appreciate the fuck out of everybody that had a hand in this. You guys did something really special with this one, so thank you.
Oh, thank you, and thank you so much for watching it, and like this goes back to something we talked about earlier. Like I'm happy that it came out on Netflix, and because it was a film that we didn't know what was going to happen in theaters, especially during the pandemic. Like when people go watch an original movie that no one asked for, but to see that like once it hit the Netflix, it was like well received by families, and it has touched people and it has connected people, especially in moments that make you think of either your parent or you think of your kid. Like the fact that we can help you be happy and cry and laugh at the same time. Like that's the best gift we can give to the world. I don't know how to put words together. I'm sometimes like refrigerator magnets. I'm just like words, but whatever. This has been this has been a blast though. It's been one of the favorite podcasts I've actually had that I've talked on. So thank you.
Thank you, man. I really appreciate that, man. He's been Guillermo. I've been Julian. This has been a What's My Head podcast, and this has been another piece of your childhood. Good night.
Thank you.
Watch those old Simpsons episodes. They're so good.
On
every level.
How old would you have been when those Simpsons episodes were coming out?
I was 13 when the Tracy Ullman show came out, so junior high, freshman in high school when the show started. I mean, I remember everything vividly. My life changed.
Yeah.
And that was before I even knew I was gonna work on the show. Like I could work on the show. I was just a fan. I will never forget watching those early Tracy Ullman episodes, and then I had heard this pre-internet, like they're coming out with the series. Day one, like I had the VCR ready, and it was that Christmas episode, even better than I could have dreamed, and I became that guy who would, in high school, if you ask anyone I went to high school what they remember about me, I was the Simpsons guy.
Yeah.
I would memorize every episode. It used to be on Thursday nights. I'd wear a Simpsons t-shirt every Thursday to school. I would draw the Simpsons on everybody's yearbook, on every chalkboard. I'd get Sharpies and draw them on people's arms. I was that big of a nerd.
That's awesome.
So yeah, it's just crazy that it ended up working.